I was declared dead in absentia 12 years before I was found alive. That sentence exists in a courthouse transcript signed by a judge who never met me, based on documents prepared by people who loved the idea of my absence more than my return. At the time of my disappearance, I was 48, financially solvent, medically unremarkable, and legally uncomplicated. I owned property, held accounts in 3 institutions, and had no history of debt beyond a manageable mortgage. My life was structured, predictable, profitable. When I vanished, the system did what it always does with missing men my age. It waited, calculated risk, and eventually redistributed my existence into other people's balance sheets. The illusion of stability did not collapse immediately. It adjusted. I remember the day I stopped existing on paper. It happened quietly, no announcement, no ceremony. My wife, then still legally my wife, filed the petition after 7 years. She followed the timeline precisely as advised by counsel. The children supported it. They were adults by then, advised in ways children should never have to be. The court reviewed bank inactivity, utility records, witness affidavits, and a psychiatric evaluation suggesting I had been under strain. That phrase was important. It allowed intent to be implied without evidence. The ruling transferred my assets, closed my tax identity, and reclassified me from person to estate, efficient, humane, final. While the world processed my absence, I was alive. Not hidden in a dramatic sense, not imprisoned, not rescued. I existed in a narrow, undocumented space between jurisdictions, sustained by informal labor, cash transactions, and the simple advantage of being unremarkable when stripped of context. I aged without records. I worked without contracts. I paid rent to men who preferred not to know names. I learned that identity is not who you are, but who can verify you. Years passed without urgency. I assumed my family had moved on. I assumed my financial footprint had simply eroded. What I did not anticipate was how thoroughly my erasure had been optimized. I was found because someone needed my past more than my silence. A construction company renovating a derelict industrial zone uncovered a sealed storage unit registered to a shell company I had once controlled. Inside were documents that did not match the death certificate timeline, employment records, tax filings, a notarized lease bearing my signature dated 2 years after my declared disappearance. The anomaly triggered an audit. Audits attract attention. Attention creates questions. When authorities contacted me, they did so cautiously, as if approaching a clerical error that might speak back. Verification took weeks. Fingerprints, facial comparison, medical records retrieved from an insurer that no longer listed me as alive. Each confirmation tightened a legal paradox, a dead man answering questions. My reappearance caused immediate disruption. Accounts frozen years ago were flagged. Trusts executed under the assumption of my death entered review. Property titles transferred to my wife were placed under provisional hold. The system does not like reversals, especially expensive ones. My family's reaction was procedural. No embraces, no disbelief. My wife requested representation before agreeing to speak. My eldest son asked whether the declaration could be reversed without complications. The word was used repeatedly. Complications meant clawbacks. Complications meant scrutiny. Complications meant that my return was not an emotional event, but a financial hazard. Media framed it as a miracle, found alive, against all odds. What they did not show were the meetings, the spreadsheets, the recalculated inheritances. They did not show how quickly relief hardened into resistance. I was no longer a missing father. I was a variable reintroduced after consensus had already formed around my absence. The investigation shifted focus, not to where I had been, but to why I had not returned sooner. That question carried an accusation disguised as curiosity. Had I abandoned them? Had I benefited from disappearance? Had I avoided responsibility? Each inquiry implied culpability. Meanwhile, the legal process treated me as both claimant and suspect. I was required to prove my life while defending my death. Forensic accountants reconstructed asset flows. Insurance lawyers examined payout histories. Estate attorneys reviewed wills activated under false premises. Every professional involved had a vested interest in preserving their prior conclusions. Errors are expensive. Revisions invite liability. I watched people defend paperwork as if it were truth. The most revealing moment came during a mediation session. My wife's attorney stated plainly that my legal return would cause irreparable financial destabilization to parties who had acted in good faith. The implication was clear. My survival was an inconvenience, a technicality, something to be managed, not welcomed. I realized then that my family had not waited for me. They had restructured around my absence, optimized it, and emotionally amortized the loss. My return threatened not their feelings, but their architecture. The marriage had been closed like a contract, the fatherhood role liquidated. I had become, unintentionally, a hostile takeover. The resolution was not dramatic, it was negotiated. I accepted a settlement that recognized my biological existence while limiting my legal re-entry. Assets remained where they were, titles stayed transferred. I regained my name, but not my former life. The court approved it as equitable. The word appeared in bold. My family attended the final hearing. We did not speak afterward. There was nothing left to clarify. The system had rendered its verdict. Survival does not guarantee restoration. Time reallocates loyalty. Absence compounds interest. Today, I live openly. I file taxes. I maintain accounts. But I understand now that being found alive is not the same as being recovered. The world had already finished accounting for me. My return disrupted balances that had settled comfortably in my absence. This is not a story about endurance. It is a record of how efficiently love converts into administration, how disappearance can be profitable, and how survival, when it arrives late, is treated as a liability rather than a victory. I was found alive, years later, and nothing resumed where it had stopped.